how do we know exactly who the true person is underneath for ourselves and who the true person is that we're interacting with? How can you confirm compatibility for a relationship? And how can you confirm compatibility for a job, for a workplace? How can you confirm that? How do you know? Broadcasting worldwide from the command center of emotional intelligence. I am the General, and this is the WIDP podcast. Welcome back to episode 2. We covered a lot of things in the first episode. I got to be honest, that was a difficult episode to write. It's hard to know what to say, what to talk about, how to bring a summation of everything that we're going to cover into the first episode. That's challenging. That's difficult. I mentioned it's really hard to talk about this invisible space of your emotions and the mental wiring that you have, all of those going on with a spiritual side, a physical side, our 5 senses, our intuition, our thoughts, our feelings, and everything in between. It's really hard sometimes to muddle through all that and navigate the gauntlet of that space. That's the challenge here. But I'll say again, this is the most important broadcast that you will ever hear. We are here to answer the question, who am I? It's the burning question of every individual's. Who am I? And who am I really? The impact of the environment feels like it can have a lot of weight on that. The situations of our life, the people that we interact with, the careers that we choose, these can have a big impact on the things that we then have to unpack in life. In the first episode, I mentioned that it doesn't seem right to live the first half of our life and then spend the second half of our life trying to heal from the first half. Surely you can agree and feel inside that there's something wrong with that mentality. There's something wrong with that approach. I shouldn't just be damaged the first half of my life and taking the barrage of situations, and in the second half of my life, striving up this hill to find healing, which, I mean, that's the word, right? That's the word in any self-help space. You're going to see this word, find healing and deal with your trauma and learn to cope with your damage. And it's just, so there's something missing. And we mentioned that mentality and that way of navigating life is what one might call a deficit lens, where something is broken. I'm broken. I've got to fix me so that I can be okay to navigate my situations. Okay. So when were you broken? When exactly did that occur? And then from that point in time, were you automatically like this vase that you just couldn't quite put all the pieces back together? And even if you did, there would be glue spots and streaks. And is it that you'll never really be the same? Because if that's what happens in life, none of us stand a chance. None of us stand. We're all just cracked vases. This deficit lens is pervasive in when you're bringing hope to situations of your life. I would argue that whole deficit lens is a very reactionary lens. It's a very reactionary way to approach situations of life and not very healthy. And that's kind of the stance we're going to make today, but we're going to offer an alternative. This broadcast is the most advanced emotional intelligence technology broadcast of the 21st century. I stand on that firmly. Because if there was a better approach out there, I would be taking it. I'd be using it. If there was a more effective approach to mental and emotional health, I would be using that approach if there was one more effective. I've looked. I've spent a long time looking. Dr. John Worley, who created this, he did not create this approach. He did, however, create a tool to be able to find this space in you that can pull this out and identify who you truly are. That's why this broadcast is called the WIDP broadcast. WIDP is the tool. Temperament is the approach. The approach of temperament is not a deficit-based lens. And on today's episode, we're going to not only talk more about temperament and really dive into temperament, I want to help continue your journey inside of yourself to feel, not just to know. Know is the mind, but to feel things involves the emotions, and that sometimes can be in a very uncomfortable space for most of us. So how do we tell the difference between what we know and what we feel? And how do we marry those concepts into one common language where we can launch into the world in bold confidence that who we are is enough? Because we're answering that question, who am I? And to answer that question and land on a solid surface, who am I, has to be enough to be able to then go out and navigate the world, navigate relationships, navigate careers. It's got to be enough. And so often, if you're still pursuing that answer, more than likely the answers you found up to this point simply haven't been enough. They haven't been enough to carry your self-worth through those situations. Or you thought it was enough, went into situations, got up against some really strong-willed people, not always the best kind, and found out maybe it wasn't enough to hold and stabilize in those situations, which just indicates we need a better answer. Something is missing still. This broadcast is unpacking that for you. So talking about temperament today, today's episode, I called it the triangle. And the triangle concept that WIDP uses in this temperament approach, the triangle is the visual that I'm going to walk you through to work out what is this imaginary space inside of me and my mind and emotions. And the triangle is a good representation of that. So we're going to talk today about that. We're going to draw this visual out using this triangle metaphor. First, let's just establish a few things. Again, this is a challenging space, so bear with me as I fumble through finding the right words for this imaginary world of our mind and emotions. Let's start with easy. Let's start with physical. If you have a physical disease, you're going to approach treatment of that physical disease by saying, okay, let's look at the symptoms, identify what we're dealing with, and then we're going to treat what we're dealing with. You were just living your life. You got sick, got to diagnose the symptoms, and then you go to treatment. Okay. That's a reactive approach. I was fine until. And now I have to react to what happened. In the emotional space, it's no different. And instead of saying disease, let's call it dis-ease. In the emotional dis-ease that we feel, stress and anxiety, in the emotional dis-ease, if we wait and walk through life trying to be as good as we can in our emotions until something happens, until a virus enters in, until something toxic, a person or a situation enters into our life, and then we have to react to the emotions that we feel, which is not always the best time to try to move in a healthy way of reacting. You're looking for healing in this dis-ease, this stress and anxiety. You're trying to find healing to navigate that space and get out of there so that you can get back to feeling good again. Same as physical. trying to treat it such that we can feel good again. So in the emotional dis-ease, we're reacting to what happened in the environment or with that person and with that interaction, with that situation, and we're looking to balance again. We're looking for healing. Reactive approach. In this broadcast, we're trying to equip for a proactive approach. Let's go back to physical then. Physically, what are some things that we could do proactively to try and fend off disease, to try and mitigate this risk of the possibility of getting sick, to build our immune systems, to strengthen our muscle, to work on our blood flow? What are some proactive things that we could do? And those proactive things become a preventative measure to fight disease. So the disease hasn't happened yet. We're not reacting. We're actually taking a proactive stance of our physical health to keep that sickness at bay, to keep those viruses out, to keep our immune system up, and to keep the body doing what it does best. So we're securing our health with proactive steps. How do you do that? Well, first you got to know what your body needs. You have to know about the vitamins. You have to know about physical exercise. You have to get enough sleep. You have to eat the right foods, and you have to drink plenty of water. Your body has to have these things for health. Can things happen that you weren't prepared for? Of course. So knowing what your body needs physically, you can choose to address those things to prepare and prevent getting sick, to allow your body optimum health and function. So the emotional space. How could we secure emotional health? Well, it's exactly the same answer. You got to know what your body needs. I believe that this lack of awareness of knowing what our body needs in the emotional space is the main reason why we haven't been able to take a proactive stance. Maybe as you listen to this broadcast, maybe that resonates with you. I would have if I just would have known what I needed. And in some situations, maybe you feel you knew what you needed from an emotional standpoint. You feel the emotions that indicate something is missing, something is off, something is wrong. I'm lacking something, I'm needing something. And so there was already that dis-ease that was there. Well, goodness knows we wouldn't have put ourselves in that place. So clearly we were just trying to move in that space, but no one trained us how. So here we're going to talk about how could we secure our health, our emotional health. Well, first we got to know what our body needs. So let's talk about this triangle. These are the building blocks of who we are and how that plays out in life, just from us. So just be selfish and think about yourself. That's okay. It's not sin. You're good. So in a nice, safe space of this broadcast, you get to advocate for yourself, think about yourself, focus on self, and these building blocks picture a frame of a triangle. Just the three sides, 1, 2, 3. That frame, we're gonna call that frame that emotional space. So picture that triangle that holds that emotional space. That frame keeps all that in. So we have our emotional space. There's 3 tiers to this triangle. 3 levels. If you want to think of a pyramid, that's fine too. A pyramid's going to have a foundation. This triangle has a bottom layer. This foundation supports the rest of this triangle. This foundational layer is the temperament. So your temperament is the bottom layer that holds everything else up. This bottom layer of the triangle of your internal, invisible, emotional frame, this temperament is where everything begins. Let's talk a little bit about temperament. Because temperament, as we established in the first broadcast, temperament is the true you. It answers the question. And that's a bold statement. The true you holds everything else up. And if the true you is identified, then we know we have a solid reference point for everything else in life. The temperament is that foundation, a place we can go to no matter what. And we can go there anytime. It doesn't have to be reactionary. We can look at that anytime because who we are, your temperament, never changes. This was the emotional genetic code from birth. You were wired this way the same way as you were wired to have blue eyes, brown eyes, green eyes, whatever that is. The same way your hair color was already determined. You had specific emotional wiring. And that emotional wiring makes you you. If you think about a wax stamp, so you have this envelope with this letter, and you wanted to seal it. They had this hot wax, and you take this wax. Well, we're going back into the very far back beyond time. You had this stamp, this wax seal, and that seal could be anything, but often it was unique to you, family crest or whatever it was. And you would take that seal and you would impress that seal into the hot wax. That when you pull it away, not only did that envelope seal, it had your seal. My family crest, sealed this. That unique stamp. We know exactly who sealed it. And so it was the impression that was made onto that envelope. The impression that was made onto you, unique to you, that's your temperament. It's that seal right into the wax. And you pull back that stamp and you get to see the picture of whatever it is that's unique. That's your temperament. The foundational layer of everything that you do in this invisible world of your emotional architecture. Your temperament is not the only layer in your inner side. If you look up the word temperament in a thesaurus, it will tell you that it has some synonyms. Some of those synonyms, those might include character, disposition. It says attitude. It even says temper. It's part of temperament, where temperament comes from. It says personalities. Is your temper. That these are all synonyms. Even behavior. That these are synonyms to temperament. True temperament, in its understanding, is extremely unique and is not interchangeable with personality, behavior, character. And we're going to focus on those other three words because those other three words are what make up the other layers. Behavior is the end result. The other two layers, personality and character, are what we're going to be talking about. Temperament is different than character and personality. So temperament being the foundational layer of who you are, what makes up who you are, and you do not get to change your temperament. This is your genetic code any more than you can change the color of your eyes. If you try to change the color of your eyes, that's fine. But underneath is your true eye color. The same is true here. You can wear a mask of personality all day long, but underneath is the true you. That's the you that we want to identify. Those are the needs that we can't neglect. Those are the needs we are identifying for true health to take a proactive stance in your life. So with temperament being that foundational layer, let's go to the next layer just above it. Now, this is your character. Your character houses, that's that second layer in your triangle. Your character houses your values and your belief system, your ethics, your morals. Those are all in your character. And you get to pick. Character is an element of choice. You get to pick your character. Your character is different than temperament, not only in that you can choose it, it simply houses different things. Values, ethics, and morals are not needs. Those are a different part. Your belief system is not part of the needs that you have. Your needs are specific. Those are temperament needs. But your character is something that can be changed and can be molded by your environment. I want to go into temperament. I want to go into character a little bit more and talk about how your environment molds that. Let's pause, because there would not be a broadcast. There would not be this episode where you're learning your internal self without two key people. I have to shout out my sponsors. I'm going to do it quickly, but I have to do it intentionally. Connie Davis is the one responsible for the first 6 episodes of this broadcast. Connie Davis runs Maiden Explorations, and her whole identity of Maiden Exploration is to unlock commerce. I love that phrase, commerce. Commerce is how people move. It's more than just finance. It's more than just money. Commerce itself, if you think about commerce in a way of people, it's how people move. It's the currency of energy, the currency of their finances, the currency of their time, the currency of their communication, of their passions interacting with one another. Commerce is all of that. And so Connie's goal is to unlock how commerce should be for people in their healthiest forms. And she does that now with multiple podcasts that she has sponsored to bring that awareness in those other areas. There's some great financial wellness podcasts that she has now, and she runs some too, even on blockchain technology. So finance is still a big part, but we're looking at those through a different lens. We're looking at those in the way that people can move in a healthy and functional way. You can find her at ConnieDavisSpeaks.com. Connie, thank you for sponsoring this broadcast. This is my passion and what I do. Temperament and the lens of temperament to help people find their true functional, healthy selves is a passion of mine. And if there were a better tool out there, I would be on this broadcast talking about that instead, but there's not. This one works, and that's why we're here to talk about it. The other person I want to shout out to, I don't think I did in the first broadcast. I got to thinking about it earlier, and I said, I don't think I even thanked him but I want to have a special shout out to the producer of the broadcast that makes it sound so well. The audio quality is fantastic, and I've already seen that those who have the video aspect, I chose not to do the video aspect, but those who do, Kyle works in all of that. So Kyle Goodnight has Goodnight Podcasting Solutions. That's where you can find anything if you want to have a podcast of your own. He's also even written an ebook. This guy helps you scale your podcast, find your ideal client. He can help you with a podcasting roadmap. He can walk you through all of that so you can build that into your business plan to help grow your audience and to speak about what's important to you. So you can find him at KyleGoodnight.com. That's GoodKnight, KyleGoodnight.com. Kyle, thank you so much for the work that you do to make this broadcast possible and to make it sound so good. So thank you. Make my voice a little deeper too, if you can. So character. We talked about temperament at the base. That second layer of the triangle is your character. Character is changeable. It houses your value system and your belief system. And character, it's important to delineate something about character. Temperament is not environmentally impacted. In other words, no matter what your environment and no matter how much you change your environment, it will not change your temperament. If you go into a counseling session, if you go into a therapy session, wanting to work through emotional problems, even relationship problems, the brainstorming that's going to happen there and the unlocking of what's inside of you to talk through is going to not only talk about the problems and what you're witnessing, but the outcome of that is going to start brainstorming solutions. Most of those solutions are going to involve some sort of change in environment, change in situation, change in structure. And what you find on the end of that, because this is exactly what Dr. John Worley found at the end of his counseling sessions of 35 to 40 years of his clinical practice, is that all of those solutions were short term. You were going to be coming back because you can change your environment, but the root cause that never changes, the temperament needs that are going unmet, are not getting addressed. Changing your environment will not change those outcomes long term. It's addressing the needs that's going to make a difference. So as we're talking about character, it's important to know that character can be changed and can be affected by your environment. Your character was formed because of the many different environmental impacts that you have. So for example, the family origin that you have helped shape your character. The number child that you were, I was number 2 of 3. That impacted some of the character that I have and that I was formed and molded into. Your work culture, your home life, where you grew up, whether a city, a country, or in the country, rather, we all grew up in the country. The friends that you have, the friends that you keep now, friends that you had in high school, those helped shape and mold the character that you have and the way that you chose to navigate some of those spaces, the teachers that you had, the role models, even some of the ones that you watched on TV. Like I watched Mr. Rogers. That was a big impact. The geographical location that you have. If I'm operating in a certain mentality of character and values and belief system and ethics and morals, and I go to Japan and I live there for 2 years, first of all, I'm going to have some culture shock whenever I get there. There's no doubt about it. But at 2 years of living in that space, the geographical location, the cultural differences, all of those impacts, that's going to impact and influence and may even have a positive change on some of the things that I go, wow, I really like, I'm going to make up stuff. How I've never been to Japan, how peaceful they are. I love how disciplined the Japanese culture is, how they don't bring conflict outward, how they handle that differently. I really like that. I want to adopt that for myself. I really value that. And it's because I was in that space and that impacted me. Now, it's interesting because none of my temperament needs change. But the values and the belief system that I have, I might want to choose to mold some of that a little bit differently because my environment changed. Maybe my friend circle changed. So character is a very different part. It's not the same as temperament. And so in your mental, emotional, internal triangle frame here, make sure to delineate that you have a foundation that is the true you. And then you have a character that is formed from not only who you are in your temperament, but also from the many environmental changes. If you change your environment, you might impact some of those things, but you will never get down to the core. You can change a few things positively in your character, but you won't get your temperament needs met by changing your environment. That's not how that's going to work, not on principle. So your character, very important to know the difference. The self-help books, marriage seminars, counseling, even trying to get career advice, gaining wealth and trying to make more money. Maybe you want to change your focus to traveling or van life or all of these. You can look to these things to help solve your problems, to help treat the dis-ease of the anxiety and stress in your life. You can try these, but you will only go so deep. And there's a reason for that. The reason is because these things are not built to specifically address the needs that you have. They're built to try to fix what's broken. They're built to treat the symptoms. That's as far as those resources can take you. So let's say that you're in a difficult marriage. Let's say you're having marital problems. The best you'll be able to do is dive into those marriage seminars, dive into self-development books and self-help classes, and you might land on some solutions like, okay, in my marriage, in order to fix my problems, to help me interact some more, I'm just going to, I'm going to try to love them better. I'm going to stand on some good character principles that I have too. And I'm going to love them better, and I'm going to try harder, and I'm going to do more and pay attention. It may be so bad that you go, well, you know what? I committed here. So, and that's important. When I said I do, there were vows, and those vows matter to me because I'm loyal And so when all else fails, I'm going to lean into, I made a commitment and I'm going to stick. So I'm not leaving, even as hard as it gets. I'm not going to leave. See, that's good. Doesn't change the problem, but that's helpful. You can't solve problems when you're walking away. Or at worst case scenario, I'm going to fake it till I make it. I'll just fake it till I make it. It's no problem. I don't know the answers. I don't know what the solutions are, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try so hard that I'm even going to show love even when I don't feel it. And that's noble, isn't it? There's a lot of nobility in that. It's so cool to watch people, forgive and forget. And these are all short-term fixes. They are all meant to fill that void of that dis-ease that you're feeling, that something is off. That dis-ease, that void of true intimacy, of true partnership. And it assumes that there is something off that you're feeling, even if you can't quite put words to it, that you've argued about, you've tried to get down to the root of, but it's difficult to find it. You're not going to find it in your character. You're not going to find it just because of the environment. By changing the environment, you fix everything. In order to find out what's going on in a problem, you've got to know the root cause. In order to understand why physically something is affecting you, you have to first understand how the body works. And typically that's individual because bodies are different. They're built on the same biological structure and rules, but they're different in that what affects one person may not affect another. Allergies are a great example. I've never struggled with allergies. My father had sinus headaches into his entire adult life. It's just the way it was. So even the same biological makeup is going to have some differences in terms of how things affect another person. It's because that person is individual and those things are unique. You have to understand what those needs are physically. Emotions are the same. In order to understand how I'm going to fix my marriage, I have to first start at the very bottom level, the foundation of who I am and the foundation of who they are. Without that, it's just like my nose is running and I'm going to manage that symptom without ever treating the disease. If all you do is cope and manage symptoms all day, you'll stop the runny nose, but it's either going to start up again or it's just going to take a lot longer to heal because you're not actually addressing the core problem. So character, even a change in character, I'll do better. I'll fake it till I make it. I'll hold tight to my commitment and my values of loyalty. You can hold to those. It's not going to solve the dis-ease. To do that, we've got to know what those needs are. Let's go to the third layer. Now, the third layer is the most surface layer of the triangle, of this invisible inner side of who we are. We talked a little bit more about this in the last broadcast. We're going to cover it in detail here. It's your personality. Remember, those assessments that are out there, you can get a little aha moment from a Myers-Briggs. You can get a little aha from a DISC. You can maybe have a nice little team work meeting about the differences in some of those ways that we are at work. But if you'll notice that DISC, you got to take it again if you change environments, which means it's only as reliable as you stay in that environment. What about the next environment? Well, you got to take another assessment because your personality may be different there. You may choose a different mask there. The personality is the mask that we put on. At home, I have a mask different than work. At work, I have a different mask from church. At church, I have a different mask from my children. At children, a different mask from my spouse. At spouse, a different mask from my parents. Parents, a different mask from my grandparents. I have a different mask depending on as many situations, probably different at Starbucks, probably different at Walmart, probably different at Ross, probably different at luxury hotel, probably different. Just pick your environment. I can put on the mask that I choose to navigate that space in the most comfortable way that I want to, or the most useful way that I want to. I can put on that mask, don it for a while, and finally, whenever I either get back home, get to my room, get to wherever I'm in my car, at my place of peace, I can drop that mask again. Personality, the mask that we wear, is a mask that we can keep up, but that is exhausting to maintain long term. This mask, to help us navigate situations, costs a lot of energy. Ideally, we would want to be ourselves in every situation. Ideally, our true self would be able to shine where we wouldn't have to put on a mask. So as we choose when and where to put this mask on, just know this truth. It's exhausting to maintain that mask, to maintain that image. So let's talk about the mask. I think this is important. You're gonna appreciate this about this mask, because this mask is there's some interesting details about this mask. A mask, let's use two separate environments here to really solidify this. Let's say that you're in a job interview. Everybody knows in a job interview, most interviewees put on the best possible mask. And with a little bit of company research, you can look up mission statements, company values, you can look up structure, you can look up the volunteer efforts of that company, you can look up the job description, you can look up even some of the people, and what you might try to pick out is how those people are. You can put on the best first impression possible for your job interview so that you can land that job. And what is the goal? Not just to land the job. What's the goal in that interview? The goal in that interview is to show yourself in your best form that you are just the right fit that they're looking for. Everybody wants to do well at a job interview. A lot at stake. So you put on the best first impression mask you can. Okay, nothing wrong with that. I want to look at it from the interviewer side. As an interviewer, how do you know that this person actually is the best fit for the job that you need done? How do you know? Because everybody knows. They're putting on the best first impression possible. Everybody knows. The interviewer is the most relaxed person in the room. The person being interviewed is the most stressed out person in the room. Everybody knows that. Why? Because the interviewer can be more like their actual self because not as much is writing on that. However, the interviewee, they got a lot at stake. They got money, survival, rent's coming due, family to feed. So they're going to do their best to show their best. How do you know as the interviewer that you're making a good choice? Because you're making that choice based on what the person is showing you. Dating is no different. You're on a first date and both of you want to give a good first impression. You want to do well because obviously we're there for a reason. And so we want to come across well. How do you know? How do you know that the person's a good fit? And how do you know that you can rely on what they're showing you? My point in this is that personality, if you know personality is a mask, I didn't say it was evil. I didn't say it was wicked. And I didn't say it was intentionally deceitful. That's not what personality is. It's useful. It's useful to show your best first impression in a job interview. It's useful to put your best foot forward. It's useful to show your best self on a date. It's very useful. And that's normally what we do. But that's going to put us into some problems because that's the information that we're observing and we're trying to draw conclusions based on that information. If we're the interviewer, if we're the other person dating, we're trying to get information to get our needs met. And we don't actually know if the first impression that we're getting here, if this projection of their best self, albeit cordial and wonderful, we still don't know. And it's important to know the difference, that the personality may not be the true person underneath. It's vital to know these three layers, because you are also very, very likely putting on a mask also. And that's okay. Useful. So know that that mask that you're putting on may be different than the person you truly are. If we're going to be moving out into the world, and not only ourselves, moving out into the world from who we are, the needs that we have in our temperament, our values of our character, and choosing useful masks to put on to help us navigate life and situations and interactions using our personality. How do we know exactly who the true person is underneath for ourselves and who the true person is that we're interacting with? How can you confirm compatibility for a relationship, and how can you confirm compatibility for a job, for a workplace? How can you confirm that? How do you know? This broadcast is here to answer that question, because who am I? All of those situations revolve around that question. Knowing who you are and knowing how to know who another person is in order to draw the right conclusions with the right information. This is healthy material here to navigate this space. Starts with you. The first step, we took that first step today, because the first step is you have to know the difference between temperament, character, and personality, all of which are in that invisible space. The first step is to know the difference. You may not have even known those three layers. More than likely you didn't. It's a great breakdown. So think about that triangle, because that triangle is one of the most powerful metaphors that I currently have in my arsenal. That metaphor is powerful. It gives you a visual of that internal space, and start unlocking the weird emotions that we feel. Why do we feel this way? Why do I feel this way in this situation? But over here, Jenny Sue is having an easy time over here. I go to a conference and I want to sit in a corner and have a private conversation with one, maybe two other people, talking about something that I very well better know. I don't want to navigate the room, but Jenny Sue's over there just navigating the room. She's just bouncing around, having conversations easy as ever. I don't want to be Jenny Sue. It's cool that she can do that. I'd rather be here in the corner having my private conversations. That's where I'm going to be the most comfortable. What I really want to be is at home. So why is Jenny Sue so good out there? Why does she look so comfortable out there? Why do I just want to run and hide? But if I have to be here, why do I need to have those conversations in the corner? All of those questions get answered in temperament. The first step is to know the difference. Knowing that you use your personality to navigate, knowing that your character you can change and more than likely is impacted by your environment, but that you cannot handle dis-ease of your life. You cannot manage true health and function for yourself without knowing your temperament, without answering the question, who am I? What do I need as an individual? What about, I can go to the gym, I can manage my physical side. How do I take a proactive stance of my own life and participate with and sit well with my emotions, to know that I can manage my mind and manage it in a very healthy way, not just when I sit in silence with myself, but navigating space with others, especially those closest to me, my best friends, my spouse, my parents, my children. Navigate. Those are important. Those are counting on you. And not only that, especially if they're kids, they're looking to you. They're observing you to see how you handle those situations so that they can start figuring out how to handle those situations for themselves. Awareness is the single greatest gift we can give to our children, and we have to have that first. So this awareness was the first step. Knowing the difference between temperament, character, and personality, those are not interchangeable. Those are very distinctly different. I really hope that helped you today. I hope that gave you some meat on the bone to chew on about that internal side of you. I like to remind ourselves of the deficit lens of brokenness versus this new lens that we're stepping into. You're doing it through this broadcast. You're hearing it now, and you're feeling out these spaces within you. Now you're walking into a needs-based lens where actually emotions start to make sense. You're not just an overthinker. You're not needy. Actually, now the way I'm feeling in certain situations makes more sense. And it's not just because daddy maybe didn't love me. Maybe it's because there are some needs attached to that. And if I know what those needs are, I don't have to go into situations and react. I actually can create and take a proactive stance in my life, a preventative health stance, where I can move into any situation knowing exactly who I am in full health and function. And then I can make good informed decisions, especially in relationships, because I've already got half the equation. I know who I am. I know what I need. I know what are non-negotiables for me in order for me to have health. And so when I take that proactive step into those seasons of life, I can do it wisely because I'm now informed. I have the awareness, and that's what you're getting on this broadcast. It's let's have an intelligent conversation. We're going to wrap up with this. So here's the hard truth. Why our brain sometimes chooses to react, and sometimes knowing this stuff is not necessarily where we naturally go. It seems like a lot of work, and here's why. Being a victim of our own life and sitting in a place of reactivity is actually easier. It's easier. It's easier to point the finger and blame. It's easier to say because daddy didn't love me, this is why I am the way I am. It's easier to say that the world is against me. It's easier to say that I was betrayed and I have a right to stand on these things. It's easier to say that injustice is overwhelming. It's easier to be a victim. But it's not the healthiest. Being a proactive participant of your own life means that you actually are embracing a reality of life. And that is that you're responsible. You're responsible for you. You're responsible for your actions. You are responsible for the way that you move into those situations. And that all begins with your self-worth. I might have mentioned this in the last broadcast, but I'll mention it again. I liked my father saying when he said, we don't want to dump our garbage in someone else's yard. A lack of self-worth can do that. Insecurities can do that. We actually end up dumping our garbage into someone else's yard. And worse, we may even expect them to manage that for us. Well, if you would have just done better, I would have this or that. Well, if you would have told me that better, I could have heard you. Well, and fill in the blank. It's easier to be the victim. It's easier to point. It's easier to blame others, and it's easier to blame the world. But you're not that person if you've made it that far in this broadcast. This broadcast, as I mentioned in the last one, is not for the stupid. This is not for the deaf and dumb. Those who are willing to be emotionally honest with themselves means that they're willing to accept that reality, that they're accountable and that they're responsible for their decisions in their life. But that's also the good news. You get to choose. You get to move into your life and create. Even if you've been hurt and bombarded with life all the way up until now, today can be that pivot because we're learning who you are. We are answering the question. And you know what answering that question does? It advocates for yourself, even if no one else has up to this point. you can advocate for yourself because you are learning and answering that question. Who am I? And you're going, I have the potential to know exactly who I am. No one could change it, and no one could tell me differently. That's a courageous stance. That's an informed stance. That's a stable stance. That's a healthy stance. That's a functional stance. And that's why foundation is that's why temperament is the foundation of that triangle. It holds everything else up. We focus on temperament in this broadcast, the most important broadcast you will ever hear. I'm excited that the good news is that you get to create your life. You get to choose your future if you know what you can change and what you cannot. You cannot change who you truly are, and that's the best news ever. You get to embrace and love who you are by discovering the true you, answering that question, and moving into into life with health and function. All of your relationships then can be addressed from that platform. Who am I? And you can respect other people from that same platform. I respect who you truly are and the needs that you have in life. Notice how the conversation changes. It changes from I respect who I am and I respect who you are because of the needs that you have. I'm never going to degrade you for needing to drink water. It's part of being human. And I'm also never going to degrade you for the needs that you have emotionally. I can understand those needs and perhaps I cannot meet them. That's an intelligent conversation and good awareness. But notice how that's different than a conversation where everybody's broken and we're all just trying to heal. That's not as empowering, is it? That's not one that is everyone is moving towards health and function with health and function already in hand. That's one where we're all climbing the mountain, striving, taking the bombardment, reaching for the next thing, and just praying that it's solid and that we don't slip and fall and slide back down the mountain. I just don't believe that. That's not how things work. You do not have to be this broken piece of pottery that will never, ever be repaired, hoping that maybe one more blow won't come for the rest of your life and you'll be able to grab the pieces that are left. And no, come on. Nope. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be a life of dis-ease. You can live a life full of health and function. As a matter of fact, with this news, your life can even start today, if it hasn't already, because you can choose to go from reactive to proactive. Take a proactive stance in your life, empower yourself with who you are, and move in full health and function. If this is the type of stuff that gives you goosebumps, that gives you energy, that advocates for yourself even if no one ever has before, you are in the right place, and I am the general. I will help lead the charge into that perfect health and function, knowing who you are and being able to have a solid foundation, and it rests in temperament. This is the WIDP podcast.